How are you doing?
I mean, I'm hanging in there.
You know,
Um, Go
how
ahead.
I was going to ask you. I mean, I talked to a member of the 1-6 committee staff about having you guys in the room, and I said, how focusing was that for all of you to see them there, the people that have protected everyone, and to understand at every moment what you were doing it for? And he said it was just that, it was focusing. But I wondered and wanted to ask what that was like for you.
Testifying before the select committee.
That and
I mean,
then,
to me,
yeah, and then being there for all the public hearings.
listen, that testifying was like any other courtroom testimony for me. Um, I mean, I think maybe I was a little bit more impassioned in my delivery, but other than that, I mean, it was just another day in court. Going to the hearings, I don't know if it was necessarily the best thing for me or my personal health, but I felt like it was an obligation that I had taken up, and I wanted to show support for the members of the select committee who have made some pretty great personal sacrifices to investigate what happened on January 6th and the events leading up to it.
Is it surreal? You know, that I played that testimony from you a few times because enduring what you endured physically and psychologically in the moments of the attack feels like the first injury. The second is the denial on the part of the Republicans, the refusal to award medals to the men and women of law enforcement who protected everyone who worked in the Capitol. Can you take us back to the moment when you realized that this attack wasn't going to break the fever, that the right was not going to acknowledge the reality of 1-6?
I think for me, it was, and I forget the day exactly, but it was when Andrew Clyde, the congressman, testified that January 6th was just another tourist day. I mean, I remember that testimony vividly, and I remember the phone calls that I received from dozens of other police officers that were there at the Capitol on January 6th and how outraged they were. So that was the moment for me that I realized this is not going to be an off-ramp for Republicans to, get rid of Donald Trump once and for all, that they're going to double down, and it's going to be a long, brutal fight.
When you hear the things that Kevin McCarthy said privately, and I know you met with him privately, and I know you write about that, and some of those tapes came out with the publication of your book. When you hear him able to acknowledge the reality that you lived and we saw with our own eyes privately, what do you make of what he's done publicly, which is to elevate the insurrectionists, to kowtow to Marjorie Taylor Greene, to do nothing to Mr. Clyde and others who are whitewashing January 6th to this day?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Kevin McCarthy only cares about Kevin McCarthy and his own political future, and he sees the best vehicle for the success of his political future as being the Republican Party and its success. And so he'll do anything and everything to ensure that the Republican Party gains power, and so he can eventually hold the gavel and be the speaker.
You are inside, and I think your book reflects that. You see it this way: this bigger fight over truth and lies. That the lies about January 6th, at least on the right, are winning. How do we hang on to the truth? I mean, do you see like a 1-6 memorial or a museum where all of the firsthand accounts and all of the testimony from yourself and Officer Dunn, or where the truth can live? Are you worried that as we get farther away from it, the whitewashing prevails?
I mean, listen, I think those things are all appropriate. Obviously, I've been advocating for acknowledgement for the officers that fought on January 6th. I think that those officers deserve to have a medal pinned on their chest. I think that there should be a memorial at the Capitol representing the Metropolitan Police officers and U.S. Capitol Police officers that fought to defend it. That being said, I don't want anything. The only thing I want is accountability. I want people going to prison who broke the law. You can save your medals and your plaques and all that other garbage. I don't need it. I just want to see people go to prison.
The January 6th committee unloaded a mountain of evidence implicating Donald Trump as a person who knew he lost and invited insurrectionists and extremists to Washington as early as December 19th on Twitter. They got him. They got him. What do you think is an appropriate, what does accountability look like for Donald Trump?
I mean, I believe that the evidence put forth by the Select Committee shows that Donald Trump engaged in an effort to defraud the American people, and that as a result of that effort, we saw the violence that ensued on January 6th. There is certainly plenty of evidence to support that, to support an indictment against Donald Trump, and to have him be tried. And I think that as Americans, we should accept the results of that trial.
I mean, you lived firsthand what happens when Americans don't accept what they see with their own eyes, the loss of the president they supported. Do you think Americans will, or is that besides the point?
To be honest with you, I think most Americans are indifferent to what happened on January 6th. I mean, obviously, there's a small amount of Americans, I count myself as one of them, that are incredibly passionate about what happened and see the urgency in the threat to our democracy. In the same token, I think there's equally as many Americans that believe that January 6th was, another 1776 moment in American history. And they support those that attacked the Capitol that day. And those include the former president. These two factions in America, I believe, are at war. And the rest of Americans just don't care. They're more concerned about their own personal lives. They don't see what happened that day as affecting them directly. They're more concerned about, how much they've got to pay at the pump or how much groceries cost.
I worked in politics, and I learned not to blame the voters, but to blame the people making the arguments in front of the voters. But I agree with your assessment. How do you make them care? I mean, political violence reached the home of Speaker Pelosi. Her husband was brutally attacked and had surgery to repair a skull fracture. Your physical injuries are horrific, and all you did was go to work on 1-6 and rush to the defense of your fellow your brothers and sisters in law enforcement. I mean, how do you make people see what is really happening, what you just described?
I don't believe that you can make people care about January 6th. We're almost 19 months out. I've, leaked my body-worn camera footage to the media so people could see the brutality of what happened to me and understand what the experience was like for so many other police officers. It wasn't just me up there that day. There were hundreds of us, and we were all beaten brutally. Over 140 police officers were injured. That being said, I mean, I've been out here running my mouth for almost 2 years, and it has not made very much of a difference. We're coming up on the midterm elections, and I think I've seen, both parties back away from the January 6th insurrection because they don't see it as a pathway to power. And that in and of itself is, disappointing to say the least. I think the only thing that we can do is hold those accountable that were criminally responsible for that day.
You just testified in a trial for Mr. Head, Albuquerque Head. This is what Judge Amy Berman Jackson said during sentencing. She said Head's actions were, quote, some of the darkest acts committed on one of our nation's darkest days. She pointed out all the opportunities Head had to remove himself from the battle against police, but instead rearmed with a police shield and went back to the front line. Jackson described Fanone as Head's prey and his trophy. She also described Fanone as someone who was protecting America during the riot. I just read that because it's in black and white in front of all of us. And to your point, the people who think they were there at the direction of their leader, Donald Trump, have either been charged or sentenced, as Mr. Head was. Do you have any optimism that the prosecutions will deter future insurrections, or do you think this will become the new normal in American elections that don't go the way of the right?
Well, first of all, I'd say it is the new normal. It's not becoming the new normal. It's been the normal now for quite some time. I think it's deterring those that are going to prison from ever participating in an event like that because they'll be in prison. But this is different from what I would describe as more traditional crimes. It's not narcotics trafficking. It's not, robbery. These are politically motivated crimes. And there's no shortage of Americans who are susceptible to this type of manipulation, especially when people like Donald Trump and his allies continue to spout the same lies and violent rhetoric.